welcome back. You're watching a special live broadcast here from UNISA. We are looking at, of course, the landscape of the state-owned companies off the back of the Presidential Review Commission. We did promise that the audience that is joining us will be asking questions. Can we have our first question now being asked to Minister Gigaba? We'll take the questions in batches of 3. First question, please.
Thank you. It's Puleng Kwele from Broadband Infraco. Minister, you talked about legislation, but I will come back to the now and say, in the absence of legislation, how does the Department of Public Enterprises, as a shareholder ministry, interface with policy departments and National Treasury?
Okay, can we have the second question, please? Fikile?
Minister, you speak a great deal about Africa's strategy and encouraging SOCs to trade with the rest of Africa. Will you be pursuing the strategy? Should there be additional entities that join your portfolio?
Mm-hmm. Third question, Mr. Potas.
Minister, mine is an extension of the Africa question, I guess. We spoke of the developmental role of the SOCs, and I was just wondering to what extent that stops at Komatipoort and at Beitbridge, or does that extend into the development of our neighboring countries in the subcontinent? One of the areas I'm excited about in the current procurement program is the local content requirements and the contribution of that to the reindustrialization of South Africa. But we need to provide an ongoing market for those industries, and that will obviously come from growth into the continent.
Minister, over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the questions. The department took the decision that we were going to position ourselves as a shareholder manager, as a stakeholder manager, and as a change manager. Now, in relation to the stakeholder management function, we have been paying a great deal of attention to engaging with the policy departments, because the decisions they make, the policies and legislation they draw, impact on our work. So, for example, we've been having discussions with the Department of Communications around the national broadband, the draft national broadband policy. We are also going to be having discussions with the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs around the role of municipalities in supporting broadband infraco and ensuring that we position broadband infraco becomes the anchor tenant for all of these companies. So we are engaging robustly with energy, with transport, with agriculture, fisheries and forestry, and with the National Treasury. Obviously with the National Treasury quite a lot, because we often have to go back to them
they're the one with the purse strings
to request some support of one sort or the other. We would like not to, but there is no stage when government will say we no longer have to support our companies. No stage. So I'm not excited by an argument that says we will never go back, that these companies must be so financially viable that we never go back to government to request help. We will always do that. Government is the shareholder for these companies. It's correct that it should support its companies, but these companies must also be efficient and run properly. With regard to the Africa strategy, the department has finalized the Africa strategy, and we will be taking the companies in our portfolio on board with regard to this. We've already begun implementing elements of it. Last year, I led the delegation of 8 CEOs to Ghana. We've been with Transnet to Tanzania. We've been with Eskom to Mozambique, Eskom, Safcol, and Transnet. We are already engaging with the continent. We've been engaging with other African countries together with DINEL. But what we developed the strategy for was so that we don't interact with the continent on a project-to-project basis, but there must be plan, there must be a strategy, a vision behind what our engagements on the continent, because we seek to forge strategic partnerships with the continent. Now, in pursuit of that, we will obviously have to engage the private sector to come on board as partners, and we establish a South Africa Inc. approach, the financial sector, the different legs of the private sector to support the same strategy, because at the end of the day, we forge partnerships with the continent in pursuit of South Africa's collective interests as a nation. In that regard, I expect that one of the things we are doing is engage with the Department of Home Affairs, the Departments of Tourism, to try and address certain issues related to the transit visas, the visa regime in South Africa, the immigration legislation, and how it supports and facilitates this strategy. We believe that, as you correctly say, if Transnet at the present moment is the assembler of wagons, which wagons we are assembling not only for our own consumption and use, but for the Africa market. I've given Transnet Engineering, for example, a mandate, an instruction to become an original equipment manufacturer for the purposes of exporting to the African market as well as the global market to facilitate regional integration. So the continent becomes the primary area of partnerships and operation for our companies, because ultimately the South African market will be saturated, and for these companies to grow, we need to begin to look beyond our own country.
And of course, expansion into Africa is the logical next step, Minister,
Absolutely.
as you put it. Okay, can we have another set of questions there? The gentleman in the blue shirt. Can you start, please?
Thank you, Minister. I'm Otto from A Square MD. My question, in terms of the background, that necessity is the mother of invention. The policy framework, the governance framework, how do you see that is going to balance the necessity for state-owned enterprises to perform versus government help? Because if there's too much help that comes from government, it deprives the management from getting the opportunity to innovate and find solutions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can we have the next question, please?
Thank you, Minister. My name is Hadin Rachisusu. I'm Director at Hekima Advisory. Minister, we appreciate there's a process underway to review the architecture of SOEs. But in your view, what do you see the role of SOEs going into the future? Are we going to see SOEs that work side by side with the private sector, or are we going to see SOEs that participate in most sectors of the economy, like you see in countries like China? Thank you.
Okay, last question, gentleman there with the striped jersey.
My name is Jafta. I'm an alumni and I'm an audience and I'm a citizen, so therefore I will ask from a layman's point of view. Most of the time we hear stories about state-owned enterprises and we hear negative news on the media. This is an opportunity now I can ask, when are more good news about strategic partnerships with the public, between public and private sector, going to be fast-tracked so that efficiency and effectiveness is available and services provided to the people? Because at the moment, if all bad news is about how things are failing only in SAA and yet efficiencies in their systems not taken to other places, it becomes a factor and we are not employed.
Okay. Minister, shall we start off with a question around innovation and assistance with, getting government assistance?
You know, the fact of the matter is that we expect the companies to perform, to be innovative, and you have seen this innovation in a number of the companies. Your Transnets being a case in point, Alexco is coming up very well. We are seeing the innovation in how ESCOM pursues supplier development programs and how they are running the business amidst the capacity constraints which the country is facing, and therefore the pressure that they are under. So in a way, the expectation on our part is that in pursuit of their dual mandate, the companies will be innovative enough, and that's why in selecting our boards, we choose the people with the skills. We look at the skills matrix in how we compose our boards, and therefore fill up those skills matrix as they are needed. And from time to time, yes, we do implement changes, but there has been stability. We've been a bit conservative in how we implement changes at governance levels, because we want the leadership to focus on the mandate which we have given them to improve the companies. Even your broadband infracos, Dinel, has been doing excellent work. They were able over the last 12 months to change from expecting a loss to posting a profit. The company's order pipeline has been growing. You see innovation in the new products that they are developing, and that's what we expect these companies to do in support of the South African economy. To the extent that some of them might and will require government support, we are not just liberal with that government support. That's why the support that was given to SAA was so stringent. It comes with a lot of very stringent requirements, because government doesn't want the leadership of the companies to expect that they have a free ride. And obviously, in the shareholder compact, the KPIs, the targets which have been set, we are equally stringent in ensuring their observance. Because if we don't do that, we will have a situation that spirals out of our hands, and we would want to be able to use that as a performance indicator to judge the performance of our executives as well as the governance structures such as the boards. Now, the second question came from, you said you are Taki. Hardin. Oh, okay, sorry. The question about the role of state-owned companies going into the future it's clear. Nothing will change. Pursue commercial interests, balance them with developmental interests. Both these must play a complementary role, because the state-owned companies must create jobs, they must develop skills. I asked all of these companies to expand their skills pipeline. We have, as a result, seen them not only training directly, but also through partnerships with FET colleges and their suppliers, expanding drastically into tens of thousands the numbers of young people who are being trained by these companies and through their procurement spend. We expect them to partner with their suppliers and customers to drive transformation. You've seen over the last 3 years, the capital expenditure of the state-owned companies growing from about 53 billion rand 3 years ago to 113 billion rand during this financial year, which means that the counter-cyclical investment program, investing against a stagnant economy, defying the gloomy mood in the economy. The state-owned companies are taking the lead, grabbing the bull by the horns, throwing money into the South African economy, creating jobs, developing skills, driving industrialization. We've seen them engaging the services of historically marginalized service providers in the accounting, in the legal, in the engineering professions. Of course, I've been saying to them, I would want them to do more in respect of the legal and the engineering professions. I would like them to do more to bring on board young people and black women. I would like them to do more to bring on board into economic participation black suppliers, because through their capital expenditure and their operational expenditure, they must develop more black industrialists who are hands-on, who don't just go to play golf and go on their next holiday. Today, Transnet launched an enterprise development hub through which they hope they are partnering with various national and provincial government agencies and private sector institutions to develop black women and youth entrepreneurs. Launched in the city of Johannesburg at the Carlton Center, not in Sandton, where it's accessible to an aspirant black SMME player. We want the state-owned companies to do that, but for them to be able to have this 60 million rand to roll this program out, to have the 200 million rand to support, to roll out the incubation program, they need to develop the profit. So as they do more business, take more goods from road to rail, generate more revenue, they will also be able to increase their investment in supporting small and medium enterprises and the incubation facilities. We want them to partner with the private sector. We are developing a private sector participation framework, which is very close to completion. The Presidential Infrastructure Coordinating Commission is itself doing that, and we are, within our portfolio, also pursuing that framework. For example, the Durban dig-out port won't be developed by Transnet because it doesn't exist in the CAPEX program of Transnet. You're going to need over 100 billion rand, and you will have to find that money in the private sector. So private sector companies, and of course I've been saying to them, the auditors who are sitting here will tell you, very forthright, I want to see black people participating in this economy. I want to see black industrialists participating in this economy. And we cannot compromise that objective. But the private sector will have a big role to play in the provision of infrastructure now and going forward as an important partner, because we need to unlock their balance sheet to support infrastructure rollout. Finally, the question, Jafta, you are asking about the good news. I've just told you the good news. There is plenty, just that when the state-owned companies are concerned, we tend to focus more on sensation and what excites us and blinds us to the important contributions they are making into the economy. If you were to privatize SAA, for example, the private sector owner, the first thing they will do is to cut the overheads and throw thousands of people into the pool of unemployment. They will cut certain routes which are strategic for the country, but which they think are not strategic in terms of making the money. They will cut down certain programs, such as the skills development programs, the training of the pilots. But when we talk about SAA, we neglect all of that. The fact that it brings millions of people into an economy that is so far away from the dominant global markets. We neglect all of that and talk about other challenges. Yes, they are important, we must address them. But there is a lot of good going on in our state-owned companies. Even if you look at ESCOM, how they have created additional capacity in terms of electricity supply, how tens of thousands of new broadband network has been laid out. All of that work contributes towards sustaining jobs, creating more jobs, not only directly but also indirectly through the suppliers.
All right, people, we're running out of time. I'm going to give one last question to the floor, and then we're going to bring back the discussion. I'm going to take the gentleman from the third row from the back, the one, there we go. So that is going to be the final question, and then the Minister and I will round off the discussion. Your question, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. My name is Michael Mpanza. I'm one of the alumni. Just one question I have, Minister, is the question of capitalization of these SOEs. I see most of them, or some of them, going to the government for bailouts. But now my question is, have we looked at whether they are sufficiently capitalized in the first place? Or are we just blaming them for going to ask for bailout?
Excellent question. Minister.
Thank you very much.
We keep the best for last.
You know, let me take two cases in point. Broadband Infraco. It was not properly capitalized from the very outset. And so the challenges it faces, competing with highly capitalized institutions in this broadband industry. South African Airways, when we corporatized it and took it out of Transnet, it was not properly capitalized. And so it leads directly to the issue you are raising, that they therefore run into problems and need to come back for recapitalization. And we then provide them a guarantee or inject equity, which is itself insufficient because we don't ask this question to start with. If we were to ask this question and say, we provide you with sufficient capitalization that's going to be based on a long-term strategy, what is that strategy? That's what SAA has come up with. We are working on that strategy together with the National Treasury and Cabinet to ensure that it is properly capitalized. SAA can now function on a long-term basis. We then address some of the challenges such as the fuel cost, other challenges such as the landing charges at the ports, and issues which might be in the domain of other departments, such as your immigration regulations, your transit visas, which impact on SAA's ability to attract passengers to travel through your OR Tambo International Airport. So we are in a process of rebuilding, very exciting, very constructive. I must pay tribute to the officials of my department, highly skilled, very committed, working day and night to ensure that we come up with a solution that's going to please South Africans.
Minister, I'm going to take the privilege of asking you the very, very last question. One of the big questions is getting the private sector as excited about state-owned companies as you sound, and as many of the people who are operating in there, are. And what I find often is that when you look at DFIs particularly, they don't operate very differently from their private sector, counterparts, and it makes it very hard for people to come to the party. And I spoke to the chief economist of the African Development Bank recently, and he was suggesting that what we should be looking at is venture capital. We need to be looking at that gap. That's often your DFIs can't do what your commercial banks also don't want to do, and you need to investigate that gap. Is that something that you're looking at, Minister, particularly if we're talking about developing black industrialists, if we're talking about pushing the boat out, in a way that can allow us to think differently and think innovatively?
We have started conversations with the DBSA, with the IDC, around public-public partnerships, around unlocking their balance sheet in order to pursue these programs that we are pursuing. We are discussing at government level, even around these issues, so that we can get a political decision and give guidance and a directive to these companies on these issues. I think for me, one of the, it's still small, but one of the advantages of the Transnet Enterprise Development Hub is that it's not a hub established out there. It's linked to a company with a massive capital investment program with supplier development needs that has unveiled to the public what its supplier development requirements over the next 7 years are going to be. So when you go into the hub, you are going to also get information on the opportunities available within Transnet, and Transnet is going, and when you get in there, there are other development finance institutions, your Small Enterprise Development Agency, the National Youth Development Agency, and others that are also going to then step in to provide the assistance required. The issue I was raising with them is that we must not be obsessed with failing the applicants. We must say to an applicant, your application is weak.
Right.
This is what you need to do. Hold them by the hand, make their application to succeed. There is a project we are doing with ESCOM around the emerging miners, where ESCOM says by 2018 we want 50% plus one of our coal supply to come from black emerging miners. And so to achieve that, we must develop a mine development fund. This mine development fund is going to be capitalized first and foremost by ESCOM itself, and we are talking to development finance institutions to also come into the party. And if the established mining organizations are keen, they must also join the party. I've met with the CEOs of these companies and discussed this with them. The excitement within ESCOM around this program, we are not going to fail. Mm-hmm. We will not stop. And we will provide the funding required for exploration and for the development of these mines to supply ESCOM, because many black coal miners would say to you, we have no space to export our coal at the Richards Bay Coal Terminal, yet we can't sell our coal anywhere in the country because ESCOM, we are too small. And so we've been saying to them, we will help you develop your mines. We also want you to partner, to come together into bigger organizations so that you increase your volumes to supply ESCOM with bigger volumes, and on that basis, you can begin to grow.
Well, Minister, on that note of partnerships and of working together with all the stakeholders, we have come to the end of our discussion. Of course, there's still much, much more to talk about, and I'm sure we will be getting you back to get updates on exactly how the landscape of state-owned enterprises and state-owned companies have going to be changing and looking at some of the developmental needs of the country. Minister, thank you so much for your time, and thank you, of course, to the audience. A round of applause to yourselves for the questions. Thank you so much. Well, that brings us to the end of this special program. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Karima Brown. Until next time, goodbye.